How many? Mr. Cart asked, his eyes focused on the piloting console in front of him. It has been several hours since their failed defense of Midnight Dissonance Station, but only now he could finally relax a bit and ask, cause for several previous hours he was busy trying to get out of the now hegemony-controlled system without being detected and run down. They all hoped that the joint forces would be celebrating their victory, or, more likely, busy themselves gathering salvage to learn as much as possible about remnant machines. But whoever was in charge of this operation was smarter than that. They knew that there were survivors around, not just Cart Logistics, but also some of the mercenaries, who failed to hold the line. And now, the attacking fleet spread out, trying to find runaway ships and even escape pods, no doubt hoping to find survivors who could explain why they were working with the insane machines. Machines themselves, however, were gone. When Midnight and her station exploded, the remaining remnant ships lost all semblance of coherent thought and simply rushed at overwhelming enemy forces, and were quickly blasted into space dust. Fortunately, it bought Cart Logistics enough time to move far away from the scene, where they could finally assess their casualties. 27, Varuna replied. She did a great job of keeping discipline during the retreat, making sure no one broke formation and ran away, because it was obvious that Hegemony would be on the lookout for them, guarding all the jump points. And roughly the same amount of wounded. Disco and his team are tending to them now. He said most of the crew would be able to make a decent recovery, though they will need some prosthetic limbs. Most dead were from inevitable end. They all died when their ship fell apart. But there were some other losses on other ships as well. House's Friendly Welcome suffered a hull breach on the bridge. He said a railgun round flew about a meter away from him and ripped his comm officer and his station in half. The round was going so fast and was so superheated that everyone on the bridge got severe burns all over, not to mention that most of their electronics got fried. We also lost 2 people from Mr. Sandman, one to enemy missile barrage and the other who went missing. Missing? Mr. Cart asked, confused, looking away from his console for the first time in hours. How the hell do you go missing on a ship? It's a face ship, boss, Varuna replied. They did a good job holding the Luddigs at bay, but they had to phase jump all over the battlefield to avoid attacks. Only that Luddigs realized that and surrounded them, so they had to overload their phase engine to get out of the encirclement. And when they blinked back, one of the engineers who maintained the engines was just gone. Mr. Cart didn't know how to reply to that. He knew things like that happened, but he had no experience with phase ships. As it turned out, jumping into another reality to avoid torpedoes came with its own set of potential issues. I see, he finally said. Tell them to post at least 2 Marines where he disappeared. Maybe he'll come back sometime. Or maybe he came back in the same spot where he vanished and is now floating in space, back near the Midnight Station, he thought, but decided to keep these thoughts to himself. Creeping out his second-in-command after such a day was probably not a great idea. In any case, get all of their names and documents. If they mention some next of kin, we'll have to pay them out for compensation. Varuna nodded. It was a standard fare for her boss. Every time someone in his care died, he always made sure their dependents would not go broke. "Will do, boss," she said, and then put a hand on his shoulder. "And what about Midnight? Is she really gone?" "She's not in our systems, that's for sure. But other than that, I don't know. If it is as she said in the end, then she's most likely dead. But maybe she found a way out, even partially. She could send some of her code or consciousness into one of those remnant ships who were still around." "She could have, yes," Varuna replied softly. "But all those ships were blown up as well." "Right, that they were. Fuck. The only one who knew how..." He paused and went silent for a moment, then shook his head and stared at the console again. "Never mind. We fucked up. That was not a fight we could have won. There was nothing that we could have done to change the outcome. Even if we rushed them at the rally point, we could buy, an hour? And even that at the cost of our own lives. Sometimes you just can't win. We should have thought of a way to evacuate her beforehand." Would it even be possible, though? She said that transfer of hers was a complicated process. Yes, I don't know if it would be possible, and it doesn't matter now anyway. We have to get back to the core and get our ships fixed, and our wounded tended to. Send a word to everyone, we're doing an emergency jump. Varuna saluted and informed all officers, and once again, her boss performed this bizarre trick which he learned centuries ago, which warped reality around them and spanned them out in hyperspace. No one questioned it this time. With all jump points no doubt guarded by hegemony and the Ludic Church, this was the safest way of getting out without being spotted, so everyone just focused on limping back to the core for some much-needed repairs. And, luck would have it, it seemed that the word about this massive operation didn't reach the core by the time the company came back, and Midnight Last's gift, the forced evacuation of CLS ships, seemed to work as well. If the company was pinged and scanned by the scanners of either Church or Hegemony forces, by now there would be contracts for their destruction everywhere. But, as far as everyone could tell, life in Persian Sector was going on as usual, and everyone had more pressing matters on their heads than hunting down for some random smuggler fleet. So, Cart Logistics had no issues making port in Nova Maxius, where they then spent another 3 days patching up their vessels. Mr. Cart used that time to send compensations to families or associates of his deceased crew, although not to all of them. Truth be told, most people serving in a fleet like that usually had a good set of reasons to keep their private lives private, and in many cases, finding anyone related to such people was pretty much impossible. Still, the boss did what he could, and while he was doing that, Varuna, House and Zala, together with a handful of other trusted crewmates, were sent into the station to gather rumors and intel. And, to their surprise, this little foray into bars and drug dens of Nova Maxius proved profitable, because one of the fuel merchants, for a small donation, remembered selling a large amount of fuel to some Tritachyon lady and loading said fuel onto a ship that, according to his description, looked very much like the Hamatsu. A few more hours, and several drinks later, Zala also managed to find out an old navigator who apparently sold Khalees Estrella some star charts. She was interested, in particular, in a faraway system called Kang, a seemingly uninteresting set of barren worlds orbiting an unremarkable star. And the amount of fuel she bought did seem like enough to make a round trip there and back again. It was not much of a lead, sure, but it was something. So, with 2 new Shepard drone tender ships in tow, the company topped up on their own fuel reserves and made way towards that distant system, hoping to pick up the trail there. It was a rather long journey. Not only Kang's system was far away, the hyperspace between it and the core seemed to be a lot more tumultuous than usual, though for veterans such as Cart Logistics, it posed no dangers. Still, this week of downtime was very much welcomed by the crews, still shaken by their resounding defeat back in Vasuki system, and it also allowed Mr. Cart to recover a bit as well. When the company left Hegemony fleets behind, he felt dejected. He came to like Company of Midnight Dissonance, not just because she was useful, but because she was, in a way, his link to old domain times. When her final signal died back there, when the Ludics blew apart her station, he once again felt this lack of connection to current events. Everywhere he looked, things seemed just as bad and chaotic as they usually were. And sure, he made profit off of this chaos, just like many other opportunists, but he longed for some more purpose, for something to give all this flying around some meaning. And, hopefully, he thought, finding Estrella and working with the Provost on her plan to fix the gate network could be that something. But then, as they arrived in Kang's system, all those thoughts had to be put on hold, because now the company had a rather challenging objective ahead of them, finding a single spaceship and a single person in a seemingly empty solar system. Searches like that were pretty much always just a matter of luck. You picked a direction, you pinged your sensors as soon as they cooled down, and hoped to pick something up. You could try and investigate points of interest, like planets, asteroids and the like, but if whatever you were looking for was not there, then all that was left was just meticulous, methodical search, one astronomical unit after another. And Mr. Cart knew that, by laws of universe being a dick, it usually meant that you always pick the wrong direction first, so he told everyone to prepare for a long search. Except this time, they were not the only ones looking for something, and few days later, they picked up a sensor ping and a large energy reading, indicating another fleet. It was the first anomaly they picked up since arriving in the system, so the company immediately set a course for the source of this ping, and soon spotted a large group of ships flying around in a search pattern. "This is a Tritech fleet," Varuna proclaimed mere moments after these vessels appeared on their sensors. Her boss gave her a questioning look. To him, these vessels looked like a bunch of random salvagers. "They're flying with civilian transponders," she explained, "but you can figure it out by looking at their comms. Look here, their ships are constantly pinging each other with small data packets. Only Tritech does that." "Or someone who wants to look like them," Mr. Cart said. "But we'll see soon enough. If we can pick up their comms from here, you think we could hack into them and listen in?" "Yes, but we need to get closer. At this distance, we'd have to put too much power into sensor array, and they might notice it. Tail them, and we should be able to do this undetected." The boss nodded and set course for the large fleet, putting entire company into silent running mode. If these people really were Tritachyon, they were probably looking for Estrella as well, or perhaps they were here to make sure that no one else looked for her, so it was better to stay quiet and out of sight. Few hours later, when they got closer, Varuna decided that now they were ready, and sat down next to her boss at the comm console, trying to use her old Tritech skills to hack into this mysterious fleet's comms. "Shouldn't take long," she said confidently. "If they're not paying attention, they may not even notice the intrusion until we're long gone." "Perhaps we wouldn't," a calm female voice said suddenly over the comm, and both Varuna and Mr. Cart barely suppressed the urge to jump from shock. "If you were not using our own methods to hack into us." Mr. Cart looked at his screen and noticed that while they were trying to hack the fleet, they were hacking them right back. He frantically closed down every channel he could, but the voice comm remained open. They could see video channel of the other fleet as well, and there they saw a smiling face of a woman, dressed immaculately in a pressed uniform of a Tritachyon officer. She gave a small, courteous bow to the camera. "You may keep your faces hidden if you so wish," she said, and while her smile looked warm, her eyes were staring into the camera with cold indifference. "You're not going to leave anyway, so it doesn't really matter." In response to her words, Tritech fleet turned around and began burning at full speed towards Cat Logistics, and even at this distance, company sensors could pick up energy signatures of great many weapons powering up. This fleet was certainly better armed than it seemed. Mr. Cart whispered a quick order into his personal comm, and hoped that they had enough time to prepare. "So, you must be those intriguing individuals who ask so many problematic questions," the officer on the other side of the comm continued her monologue. "Interesting. You are not so blunt and obvious as regular hegemony or church operatives, and you're being unusually quiet for people of the League as well. So, Syndrians then. Interesting indeed." "Hope you don't expect us to confirm your theories, miss," Mr. Cart said. He should run. All his instincts told him to run, but this woman could be the only lead they had there, so he decided to keep her talking for now. "Of course not. We will just disassemble wrecks of your ships once we're done with them, and gather info about you the old-fashioned way and dirty way." "No need for that, miss. We are merely lost wanderers. Surely there's no need for violence here. We can pay our way out. Surely a true Tritachyon executive will not pass an opportunity of earning, say, a whole 1,000,000 credits." The woman's smile grew even wider. "Oh, no doubt. Unfortunately, my mysterious guests, the board knows that as well, which is why they sent not a regular fleet exec, but me. Holy fuck, Varuna stammered, struck by sudden realization. Boss, be careful. That's one of the ship hunters. They're not taking bribes no matter how high the price you give. Correct, the Tritech officer said, bowing slightly again. Sometimes professionals are really necessary to pave way for future profits, but that voice. She scratched her head for a moment. Of course, I heard a voice like that before. So, not only we have spies here, but you are also flying around with an infiltrator doll. This truly starts to become an interesting mystery indeed, and here I thought this would be a boring assignment. Varuna slapped herself in the face. Talking out loud was stupid of her, especially since she knew who this woman was. Not sure what you meant by infiltrator doll, miss. Mr. Cart tried to play stupid, but the woman suddenly stepped forward, so that her face filled the entire screen. You know full well what I mean, spy, she said viciously. A traitor. A weapon made by our corporation, now loose and without proper oversight. Even better for me, though. It means I'll have to board your ship to extract her in a recoverable state, so that she can be interrogated and repurposed. I do hope your Marines will offer me and my crew some challenge. Mr. Cart froze for a second. The woman's eye was twitching a bit, and she had the same empty look on her face as Varuna had whenever she has to kill someone. He stared at his second-in-command and whispered, "Is she one of your kind?" Varuna nodded. "Worse. Look at her, she looks passable from afar, but they stuck her with even more implants and electronics than both of us combined." And indeed, as Tritachyon ship hunter excitedly mumbled more threats, Mr. Cart could see that her face, which from afar looked like skin, was actually a layer of overlapping plates. Not a single visible part of her body was organic, and even some of the hair on her head were actually cables, which connected her to her vessel's system. Mr. Card opened the voice channel again. "Are you another AI?" he asked. He didn't expect an answer, but the ship hunter was clearly taken by a talkative mood. "Not even close, spy," she scoffed. "The board would never hand over command of such an important mission to a machine. Despite their greed, even directors learn from their mistakes. Last AI war teach them that machines cannot be trusted, not without proper oversight, or not without improving them." "But you are pretty much a machine yourself." "I am a human being, spy." The woman seemed offended by Mr. Cart's words. "Machines made by the company may have improved me, but they cannot replace me. They cannot replace my expertise, my training, and my upbringing." Varuna shook her head. She knew exactly what kind of upbringing the ship hunter went through. Entire life, from conception in some laboratory, dedicated solely to become a living corporate weapon. "But enough talk!" Tritachyon officer stepped back, her face once again a picture of serenity. "Apologies, I got very close to spilling company secrets here. Now please, try to keep your ships in one piece when we attack you. I really don't want to spend another week sifting through space debris to figure out who you are. I'd rather learn as fast as I can, and then move on to hunt down your superiors. But please, do also try to pose at least a bit of challenge in this fight." She smiled like a shark at them, her metallic teeth glistening coldly in the blue light of her bridge's lights, and she had all the right to do so. Her fleet was approaching rapidly, and their weapons were powered up and locked on, ready to fire as soon as they were in range. "Sorry to disappoint you, miss, but you won't get either a fight nor salvage," Mr. Cart said, trying to mimic her tone. Then he switched the channel and said, "House, now!" The comms went out, but before they did, Mr. Cart could see the smug, self-satisfied smile of Tritachyon ship hunter disappearing as she realized what was happening. While her attention was focused on talking, Mr. Cart already powered up their signature jammer and focused all of its masking power on House's ship, and Friendly Welcome, being a pirate vessel, had a small surprise in store, namely a powerful interductor pulse generator, which they could now safely power up while masked, and now its power was released. Seconds later, the pulse reached Tritech fleet, and one by one its engines died down, leaving them tumbling uncontrollably through space. But House was not done. As soon as approaching ships lost all control, they fired up their mine launchers, and, over the next few minutes, prepared an explosive carpet right in the way of enemy fleet.
"Out of mines, Captain,"
House shouted over the comm.
"Time to fuck off from here."
Mr. Cart waited for just these words. As Tritachyon techs desperately struggled to bring their engines back online, he turned the fleet around and burned as fast as possible away from the threat, until they were far enough for him to fire up their signature jammer again and disappear from sight.
"Well, they managed to stop before the minefield,"
House reported with sadness in his voice.
"But at least they're not chasing us."
"They don't need to," Varuna replied. "They know how our fleet looks. All they need now is to send that data back to the core, and we will soon have every Tritech-affiliated fleet and every bounty hunter they can buy looking for us." "Can we prevent it somehow?" Mr. Cart asked. "We'd have to blow up their entire fleet for that, and even without engines they still outgun us. Well, boss, we're probably fucked on Tritachyon front from now on, and they even know we have the runaway assassin clone." Mr. Cart cursed under his breath. First Sinrians and now this. Persian sector became an increasingly dangerous place for Cart logistics. "Screw it, we fly dark all the time anyway, and we stay away from Tritech most of the time as well. We'll just have to be a bit more careful. Now get everyone back to regular stations. The fact that this ship hunter was here probably means we're on the right trail. We'll deal with Tritachyon when they become a problem. Maybe Arroyo could help us smooth it over, though I doubt it. Now, let's find this Estrella woman and let's get out of here." But as they left, Mr. Cart could not shake the feeling that this entire encounter felt wrong, and he shared this suspicion with Varuna. That woman was odd. I never expected that Tritachyon officers could be this theatrical. "Regular ones aren't," she replied. "But ship hunters usually operate alone for long periods of time, so they tend to develop quirks. They accept it in the company though, because they're so effective at what they do." "And their crews? Are they also vad-grown, just like you were?" "Not really. That would be too expensive. But ship hunter fleets are staffed with only the most indoctrinated and obedient corporate drones. People who shout for the profits when they go into battle and pray to board of directors like they were gods. Still, the fact they sent one here meant that they really do not want anyone snooping around. Whatever is hidden in this system must be important." And few days later, when the company arrived in orbit of a seemingly unremarkable barren planet, they found this important place, or what little was left of it. They wouldn't even notice it if not for Zala, who spotted a suspicious pile of boulders lying at the bottom of some random canyon. A probe was sent down, because radiation on the surface of this world was too high for regular expedition, and found out that behind this pile of rubble was a series of empty corridors, dug deep into the crust of the planet. But the tunnels themselves were empty. There were no signs of machinery or structures, not even residual radiation or dust left by its former occupants. But something was there before, a facility of some kind, judging by how expansive the tunnels were. But at some point in the past, whoever was in charge of this facility decided to dismantle it and leave no signs of who they were, and if not for Tritachyon fleet patrolling the system, a random explorer would never be able to say that the corporation had its outpost here. Only at the very bottom of the tunnels, dozens of kilometers beneath the surface, there was another sign of old inhabitants, another pile of rubble and several broken utility drones, who probably cleaned this place and then buried themselves under hundreds of meters of rock. The probe also found traces of organic material in that pile. "Non-essential workers," Varuna said solemnly when she heard about it. "Most secret facilities have them, people who are considered too untrustworthy to be allowed to leave. Whenever a black site like this one moves, there are always corpses of people like them left behind." The crews were not surprised to hear it. This sounded like typical Tritachyon behavior, but it didn't make finding all these long-decayed bodies feel any better, and, aside from them, there was nothing else here, so the company gathered some readings, recovered its probe and moved out to search for other clues. This time, however, luck was not with them. Before, they found Ship Hunter's fleet and abandoned facility rather quickly, but now they had to meticulously search every bit of the system itself, ping their sensors, wait for readings, fly a bit, ping their sensors again, until they spotted something. It took Cartlogistics weeks, during which they sometimes saw the Ship Hunter fleet on their long-range scanners, but eventually they did find something. A probe similar to ones used by Scylla Caress, hidden in the asteroid field. Spotting it was pure luck. The device was powered down and only showed up on the screen for a few seconds when other asteroids around it were not directly between it and the company ships. But once it was spotted once, finding it again was not a problem, and a day later, CLS salvagers boarded a shuttle to see what they could find in this mysterious communication probe databanks. As it turned out, it was mostly nothing, a bunch of old, mostly corrupted files. Someone tried to scrub the probe clean of all evidence, but they did a sloppy job, and some files could be at least partially recovered, and inside those files, techs of Cartlogistics found at least 3 mentions of Kalisa Strea, and, what was far more important, a destination of the last communication that the probe sent out. But these coordinates seemed odd, because they pointed at nothing at all, just some random empty spot in hyperspace, some distance away from the core systems. "No, this can't be right," Mr. Cart said after staring at this data for several minutes. He had the coordinates on the screen, trying to make some sense of them. Maybe it's some kind of code? Maybe it points to some other place and these numbers are just a fake? "Don't think so, boss," Varuna shook her head. "Remember what I told you about that facility where I came from? Tritech started moving their important projects to mobile ships lately. Maybe that is why the probe was aimed at a seemingly random spot, because a ship could fly there, receive a message and then fly away." "Could be. Not that we have any other leads, so we may as well check that one. Then again, I have no idea if we'll be able to find a single ship, no matter how large it is." But as he said, there was nothing else to be done, so the company left the mysterious empty system behind and set course for this unremarkable empty spot. Upon arrival, however, there was nothing there, just hyperspace, twisting and coiling like it always did. Except... "Gravity well, Chief?" Zala shouted over the comms, after spending hours glued to sensors. She pointed out a small portion of hyperspace that seemed to be a bit more stable than everything else around it, a telltale sign that something was there on the other side, in real space. "But this makes no sense. There are no solar systems here. Don't tell me Tritachyon can create a facility that can distort hyperspace itself now." "Only one way to find out. Action stations, everyone. We have no idea what's down there," the boss replied, and plunged the fleet into that gravity well, tearing a hole back into reality. At this point, no one even questioned that he could do something like that. Life in Cartlogistics teaches you that weird things sometimes happened, and the best course of action was to just power onward without asking too much. Besides, as soon as they warped back into real space, they immediately found another thing to focus on, a source of this mysterious gravitational anomaly. It was a rogue planet, drifting silently through dark space, far, far away from any parent star. It was a rare sight indeed. Somewhere, sometime, perhaps even before first life appeared on Earth, in the great cosmic crucible, something must have gone wrong and pushed this world out of its stable orbit and into dark depths of space. Maybe it used to be a home of an intelligent species untold millions of years ago. Maybe it used to house great biological wonders and treasures. But today, it was a cold, irradiated empty rock, dead and abandoned, except clearly Tritachyon found it at some point and decided that it would be a good place for one of their facilities. And they were right. If not for coordinates extracted from the probe in Kang, the company would never know that something was here. And Even better, the planet was not the only interesting thing.
Captain, wreck nearby.
House reported, showing a sensor image of a broken vessel on the screen.
Looks like Hamatsu, the one Ibrahim was looking for.
It was, indeed, Hamatsu, or what was left of it. As the fleet approached it, they needed but a single look to realize that it was almost utterly destroyed. Multiple hull breaches, radiation leaks, and a great empty space where the main forward battery should be. Mr. Card didn't want to scare anyone, but to him, it almost looked as if someone massive took a bite out of Hamatsu, but he decided to keep these thoughts to himself. Instead, after ensuring that there was no ambush nearby, he sent House and his salvager teams to the broken ship to see if it could be recovered for its original owner.
We could probably hook it up to friendly welcome and drag it, Captain,
the old pirate reported 2 hours later.
But this thing is not going anywhere on its own. Looks like someone went to town on this ship with plasma fire. What little is left here is mostly melted to slag.
This did not sound good to anyone, but there was a small bit of silver lining.
We did found that Estrella woman, though. Her corpse, that is. Looks like she and the rest of the crews tried to get to escape pods when they were attacked, but they didn't make it. They're burned too. We only were able to identify her because of her internal implants.
He turned his head so that camera in his helmet could show charred remains of Tritachyon crew. There was just a small group of them, though it was possible that many others perished when the ship was attacked. The salvagers grabbed what they could from them, mostly implants from inside of the corpses, but unfortunately there was no information to be gathered there. Also, despite what House said earlier, one of the engines was still somewhat operational, and after dragging a backup reactor from one of CLS ships, the salvagers managed to get Hamatsu back online. A crew of 5 could pilot it now, but the ship was so badly damaged that anything but flying could probably break it apart into thousands little pieces. But even though Hamatsu was recovered and Khalees Estrella found, there was still more work to be done. Something has brought her here, her and other Tritachyon operatives, and that something was probably located on the surface of that silent rogue planet. So, as soon as Hamatsu was able to move, the company moved there, hoping to get into a stable orbit and send a probe down. But Mr. Cart couldn't help but feel weird all this time. It was something that he couldn't really explain, a general sense of dread and wrongness that only increased the closer they got to that dark world. And then, suddenly, he heard it. A song, the same song he heard in hyperspace so many times. It appeared in his mind directly, bypassing ears, and did so suddenly he jumped back from his chair. Varuna gave him a concerned look. "You okay, boss?" she asked as he tore helmet off his head. He could swear he heard words in this song. For the first time ever he could understand it, but as soon as he tried to focus on these words the song went silent, leaving just an echoing memory in his malformed brain. His hands shivered. "Yeah, I'm fine. But we are not alone here. Tell everyone to switch to silent running right away." She passed down this order, and one by one Cart Logistics ships went dark, and as soon as the last of them vanished, a new object appeared on the sensors. A bizarre manta ray-like vessel, larger than any other ship anyone in the company has ever seen, was slowly orbiting the planet. Its construction was unlike any other. "Are we looking at an alien?" Varuna asked, spellbound. Readings on the sensors seemed to think the same thing. They could not make heads or tails about this mysterious vessel, as if simple act of perceiving and scanning it was too difficult, as if its constructions violated the very basic laws of nature. But at the same time, its shape seemed more natural than that of other vessels. It was almost as if the thing was organic, with ribs and bones serving as its armor. And Mr. Cart, and everyone else in the fleet, had no idea how to reply to Varuna's question, but they all wondered the same thing, which was worse, if the ship was alien, or if it wasn't, and was instead some new monstrosity made by Tritachyon Corporation. All that wondering, however, had to be put on hold, because as they got closer, the mysterious ship noticed them.
With grace and agility that should not be possible for something this size, it turned towards Cast Logistics fleets and, almost lazily, began approaching them. The sensors did their best trying to scan it, but all they came up with was just garbled nonsense. "Should we run?" Varuna asked, but her boss shook his head. Instead, he ordered the crew to launch a scout probe, thinking that maybe, if it got closer to this ship, it could understand what it was. Minute later, the probe was launched, but as soon as it got closer to the manta ray ship, it responded to its presence. A small, purple glowing mote of something flew out of it and flew straight towards the intruder. But for a brief moment, when that purple orb was launched, the alien vessel lowered its shields, which allowed the sensors to pick something up. "It looks like a face ship," Varuna said, staring at the readings. Mr. Cart nodded, but he wasn't sure. A lot of the data there was simply not making sense. It was almost as if this ship defied very laws of physics. That energy orb it launched seemed weird as well, because if it was indeed some sort of discharge, then it should have its own energy signature on the sensors. Instead, the readings didn't seem to perceive it at all, but at the same time, some of the garbled data coming from the sensors felt familiar to him, and in that moment something struck Mr. Cart. The organic shape of the ship and its bizarre readings, the lack of any sort of crew, the very clearly sophisticated internal systems which blocked most attempts of understanding what this thing was. What little he could understand showed a machine, but one that has been improved way beyond what any of them ever thought possible, a true merge of organic and inorganic. Something that, he now realized, someone else tried to achieve mere weeks ago. "Midnight?" he asked, opening a comm channel to this weird vessel. The ship stopped, and then, on that same channel, it transmitted a noise that no human or machine could make, an undescribable noise that put everyone's hair upright and filled their minds with fear. Seconds later, an entire cloud of those purple orbs were launched from the ship and rushed towards the company fleet. They tried to scan them, but once again to no avail, and moments later, the first orb struck the probe they sent away. And the probe just evaporated. It was no explosion, no structural damage. In one moment it was there, and in another there wasn't even a tiniest energy residue, as if it never existed at all. This was enough to wake everyone up from their awestruck daze. "Okay, now we run," Mr. Card ordered, and the fleet turned around and put all power to the engines. The orbs chased them for a while, but then they returned to the ship, which remained where it was, still transmitting its otherworldly noise, like an animal trying to scare away a quarry. But the company didn't stop running. Their engines burned at full speed until they were far enough away that the planet itself almost vanished from the sensors. Because, in its last second of operation, the probe transmitted the last bit of data, a visual of a completely destroyed Tritachyon base on the surface, clearly obliterated by this ship. But that wasn't the worst. The worst part was the final transmission, still looping from an emergency beacon in the ruins. Just 2 wards, elated and triumphant, despite explosions in the background. 2 wards that sent cold chills down the spine of every person that heard them. "It understands,"